Welcome to the LifeWork Podcast, where we help you discover joy and purpose in your work through Christ-centered insights and practical advice that transforms your career into a fulfilling calling.
Hey listeners, choosing the right college is a daunting task, and we understand how overwhelming it can be. At Williams Baptist University, our preview days are specifically designed to offer you a comprehensive look at campus life in just half a day. You'll engage in a mock class, meet passionate faculty, and get straightforward answers about the enrollment process. By the end of your visit, you will leave feeling confident in the choice that lies ahead. Visit williamsbu.edu/preview to register today.
Hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent, Dr. Norman. How are you?
I am doing well. Been looking forward to continuing our exploration about purpose and calling. You and I have talked extensively about this both in recording the podcast and in private conversations. There's a lot about life that is embedded in the idea of finding your purpose and your calling. And I thought it might be helpful to our listeners to hear some personal experiences of how this plays out. And I thought we would devote this podcast to the Rhyne Putman story. So,
all right.
I think it's a good story. I think it's still an unfolding great story.
Sure.
So, first of all, you grew up in a preacher's home?
Right. I was always, kind of jealous of those kids that had that incredible testimony where they came from, street life, drugs, gangs, whatever. And I never really fully appreciated it until I was an adult. It's like, man, I'm really glad I had great godly parents who modeled for me what it was like to walk with Jesus and to be faithful in church attendance and to be regular part of a Christian community and that sort of thing. And of course, my dad is my hero. He's a man who models ministry very, very well, and nearly 50 years in the ministry at this point in his
and he's still going
in his life. That's right. And
we might need to have him come on this podcast sometime. As you're talking, I'm thinking,
absolutely, wow. He would be great. So
the OG Putman.
I don't know that any pastor's kid just thinks as a kid, oh, I want to do what Dad does. That's not what happens or how it happens. And I saw a meme a couple of years ago that I think is probably pretty fitting. It was like two types of pastors' kids, and on the one side it was Captain America, Steve Rogers. On the other side it was Deadpool. And I think you have your pastors' kids that are the Boy Scouts, and then you have the pastors' kids that are demon children, and I think probably I fell somewhere between.
Well, I was going to ask, where would you put yourself on that spectrum?
So,
Steve, Captain, where would you put yourself on that spectrum?
I would like to say Captain America, but I don't know that I really fit the bill, even in that category. But my call to ministry probably was in part because I saw, in my dad and also in my mom, who was a pastor's wife who was great at personal evangelism, showed her faithfulness to the Lord, the way she walked with the Lord every day. But I remember a real distinct moment when I was 11 years old, and we had a group of singers called the Centurymen who came to our church, and Sunday night services, sometimes we would have mission speakers and whatnot, and they'd gone on a mission trip to Russia and came back and reported about their experiences. And I remember watching a video of a woman in Russia who had tears streaming down her face and crying. She said, I can't possibly believe in God. There can't be a God who would allow this kind of suffering to take place. And it just, it caused me to well up with emotion because as an 11-year-old who had a strong Christian family background, I just couldn't imagine people who walked without any knowledge of God and Christ, and and no saving knowledge of God. And so it just really broke my heart. I mean, I remember just going down the aisle that night, just feeling like God was calling me to speak to people like that.
Had you had a sense of that prior to that evening?
No, not really. I mean, I don't know that I had. I mean, I don't remember it anyway. I mean, maybe there were, impressions or that sort of thing about the way God was kind of wiring me. But I mean, 11 years old is still pretty young for some of that. And, that just got confirmed over the years. I remember in middle school wanting to invite all the Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons in the house and argue and do apologetics with them, and I mean, there was one day, my dad came home on a Saturday. He'd been out running errands, and he comes into the living room to watch football, and there's two Mormon missionaries, that are 6 or 7 years older than me in the living room. He said, "What are you doing?" So that's kind of where a lot of my early interest in theology and apologetics
so when
started.
you went down at 11, as best you can remember, did you have a defined, clear sense, or just a general sense?
No, I mean it was a very clear sense I wanted to be in some sort of vocational ministry, whether that was missions or preaching. I don't know that I knew at that moment, but I knew that was what I was called to do. And, that call took different shapes over the years. When I first went to seminary, I knew that I wanted to go to NOBTS, New Orleans, and be there. And I remember my first semester, it was Hurricane Katrina.
Yes, I was there.
And sign up for classes, and I remember I registered as a church planting major, an MDiv church planting track emphasis.
Think I knew that.
Well, the funny thing is I don't know that I knew it either, because somewhere along the way I really sensed God stirring my heart to do academic ministry, and I was taking all these classes in biblical languages. Eventually I just decided that I opened up a catalog and sat down, and I'm doing biblical languages because I'm going to use this to go on and do a PhD in systematic theology, and I wanted to have a solid Bible background. And it was February of the semester I was supposed to graduate in the spring of 2008, and I fill out an application for graduation, and Jody Hennigan calls me in and says, "Ryan, you say you want to graduate, but you haven't taken any classes in church planting." And so I'd completely forgotten that. But I mean, again, it was one of those things.
That is every student's nightmare. I forgot to take that class.
I also looked and showed him, like, well, I've taken all the classes for biblical languages. And they're like, oh, well, you should have told us, that was what you were going to do.
Before you graduate, I want to back up. I want to go to college.
Yeah.
So, in fact, I want to go to high school. So you're 11 years old.
I'm not 11 in high school.
Right.
I mean, I was really advanced, but not that advanced.
So we've skipped some stuff that I think I want to unpack. So you're in high school. Do you still have this sense of a purposeful calling, that this maybe not exactly like you had when you were 11, but you still have it? It's still very much in the forefront of your thinking in your life.
Sure. And yes, I mean, high school was a tremendously impactful time in my life because we experienced a kind of revival in my youth group that kind of just overflowed into the whole church. We were seeing people from my high school have dramatic conversion experiences left and right, and just a lot of opportunities for ministry, and several of the guys that I was in high school with ended up being called into ministry, and many of them are still in ministry today.
So when you were in high school and you had the sense of calling, are you involved in things that are connecting to that? So
I mean, my when I'm 16 years old, I go and preach at my home church, and the church I grew up in Mississippi, for the first time at 16. I start having teaching opportunities that come up. In fact, my senior year of high school, I'm teaching the class for new Christians with the high school freshmen. We're teaching Survival Kit by Ralph Neighbor, and so yeah, I mean those were experiences that again burned pretty clearly into my mind.
There was some, and I don't know, and you may not remember when, there was somewhat of a refining of that call from 11 to just this general sense of God calling you into ministry. And now in high school, it's taking an expression of preaching and teaching mentoring. Right,
yeah. And again, all those theological interests were kind of intersecting and formulating at the time. I mean, it was in my life, I was starting to read, people like Lee Strobel, who I had the opportunity to hang out with the other day. That was very exciting.
You're bragging.
It was very cool. So, people like Philip Yancey were very influential on me very early on. Reading his stuff on the problem of evil. C.S. Lewis,
of course.
Yeah, when I was in school, and this was part of the reason I ended up at Williams, is because in high school and in college in the public state institutions that I was a student, I really was more interested in reading the theology and reading the biblical study stuff than I was the schoolwork for. So
you didn't go straight from high school to here? No,
I went to a state university for 2 years.
And what was the thinking behind that?
I think the thought at the time was, I'll eventually get to this stuff in seminary. Maybe I need a backup plan. But, the backup plan never really was something that was going to hold my attention very long. And so a friend of mine and I, who were both at the state university together, said, "Hey, let's go to Williams in the fall." And it was just like that. We went and met with Robert Foster, and we were enrolled in the fall. And
so I also know from our interactions, you thought for a while about going into film. Film production.
Sure.
So how did that play into your thinking at that time?
Well, when I was in high school, I read, I think it's Bob Briner's book, Roaring Lambs, which was about basically, the way that God calls some people into a kind of vocation that's, outside of vocational ministry, but yet nevertheless can have kind of a salt and light impact. And he was a longtime producer at ESPN, who really saw that as his ministry. And there were people in my life who had actually been in the film industry, and I had some connections along the way. I had a good friend, many believers would know. He was Tom Lester, who played Ebb on Green Acres, was a close friend of our family's. And I was taking film acting classes with a guy named Red West, who was one of Elvis Presley's best friends at one point in time, and grew up with Elvis. And
just name dropping everywhere, man.
Well, he
Lee Strobel,
and Red was an interesting guy, because Red, after his time with Elvis and Elvis was dead, he took up a second career and kind of became a character actor. Had big roles in movies like Roadhouse, the original Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. He was in a couple of the John Grisham movies and stuff like that.
So during this time, were you thinking that God was calling you or directing you in that way, or were you just exploring it as a possible expression?
I think as a kid, I always liked creative arts. I wanted to do something creative, and so that was I still love a good movie, but I eventually kind of saw that's not where my strong suits were, and not where my gifting was.
Do you remember when that realization dawned on you?
It was probably sometime late in high school, early college. That was just not my overwhelming desire anymore.
Okay.
And
so you get to college, you get to Williams. Was it then that you begin to feel a refinement of your calling into more of the professorial kind of ministry?
No, the professorial ministry kind of thing didn't really even happen until seminary. I mean, I was, geeking out. I was enjoying a lot of my stuff. I mean, those days that I went to class and everything like that, there was a couple of times where, Ken Gore and Robert Foster had to get on to me for, flaking out on class, that kind of thing. But it worked out okay in the end.
If you're a student listening to this,
I had some knuckleheaded
do
moments.
what we say, not what we do.
Do what we say, not what we did, for sure.
Yeah.
So there's that. And I mean, I think that I just enjoyed, researching. I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed trying to communicate difficult ideas and in ways that I could understand them. So I think that's...
How did you discover that? How did you come to that realization?
I mean, that was just really, really early on. I mean, I remember, in high school, giving talks on the cults to kids in the youth group, and just talk, That's just always been the way that I've been wired. So
when you went into college, did you go in with thinking, I'm preparing for that, or was it just a general I'm preparing for ministry?
It was a general preparing for ministry, and
Okay.
just kind of see where we went from there.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you graduate with a Christian Ministries degree from Williams Baptist College.
Right, with an emphasis in biblical languages.
Okay, and you went to New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, and and you thinking, I'm going to be a church planter?
Yeah, I don't
Or
know.
at least-
I,
or
it, sound,
on
it
the
sounded,
paperwork.
it sounded sexy at the moment.
Sure.
There's a lot of young guys that go to seminary, and that's what they start off with, and they end up doing something different. So I was just kind of in that fad.
When did you sense God refining, directing, maybe pivoting your calling to what it became?
I think that was working with Bob Stewart, and just, he was someone who was very affirming of my gifts, and I enjoyed the opportunities that I had to, be around some of the world-class scholars that we brought to campus for various debates or apologetic conferences or events. And I kind of think that's where, providentially some of that creative drive and desire that, wanted to make movies when I was in high school, middle school, kind of got redirected into seeing theology and writing in theology and writing in academia as kind of my creative outlet. And so, I mean, it was not that creative desire went away. It's just it just got redirected into a different channel,
Okay.
if you will.
So you finish your master's degree and you are doing doctoral work.
Yeah.
And when you end your seminary master's work in a different place where you started it, you entered into the doctoral program with a sense of calling for what?
I think at that point it was becoming more pointed towards teaching. To be frank, I didn't expect to get a teaching job so quickly. I know that's not normally the way that works. I got an invitation from our dear friend Dr. Steve Lemke one day, and he said, "Let's go to lunch." And here I am. I'm still working on my seminars at New Orleans, and he says, "We'd like you to join our faculty." And I mean, it speaks, number one, to the desperation of Dr. Lemke and Dr. Kelly at the time, but also I'm ever so grateful that they saw something in me at that time that I didn't necessarily see in myself. Because when Micah and I had that conversation that afternoon, she was like, I thought that maybe one day you would get one of those, kind of jobs. I didn't think that it would be now. And I was like, I didn't either, I never really went looking for that kind of position, but that's the kind of thing that the Lord opened up. And I think that's, again, a good indicator of God's calling, is the way that sometimes people see something in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself.
Yeah.
And that was very affirming, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing that. And, it's like when I came here even, I didn't see myself as an administrator, really, but I kind of came to enjoy a lot of what not everything, but I enjoy a lot of what we do. That's part of it. So just being able to put some gifts to use like that.
And here you are today, still on the journey.
Here I am. Yeah, here I am.
Excellent.
Here I am.
Glad you are. Well, thank you for your willingness to share with us. I take that testimony very seriously, and I'm hopeful that those that are hearing this will be encouraged and maybe find some points of identification as they work to try to discover their calling and through that their purpose that God made them to fulfill. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I want to tell you about our new agribusiness degree. Our agribusiness program empowers you with the skills and connections you need to thrive, ensuring you never feel lost or unprepared. With hands-on learning and personalized support, you'll have everything you need to build a rewarding career. We are launching this new degree this coming fall semester. If you visit williamsbu.edu/agribusiness, you can learn more about this degree, apply for admissions, contact the faculty within the department, and more.